banks from the fiat ecosystem to crypto, and you ban all kind of mainstream employers from accepting or paying in cryptocurrency, then you can successfully turn it into a fairly kind of niche countercultural thing that has much less impact than it otherwise would. So it's somewhere between the good scenario and the bad scenario. I'm obviously hoping for the good.
Well, that's interesting. Also, the tension between governments and companies. Like if you have a bunch of billionaires or a bunch of companies like Tesla investing in Bitcoin, and then governments resisting that, it's interesting who wins out in that worst case scenario. And it almost when companies and rich, quote unquote, respectable people embrace cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, so on, even the dog coins, it's almost sends a signal to everybody else that this is a revolution that's here to stay. On this one little tangent that you brought up, this is almost an outdated idea, but it's still with us, which is cryptocurrencies are used for illegal activity, for drugs, for crime, and so on. Is there some sense that worries you that if cryptocurrency, if Ethereum runs the world, then crime, making money from crime will be easier?
There's always that possibility, but at the same time, I think if you look at the world as a whole and the way all the other technological trends are going, in-person surveillance is just going up every year, right?
Yeah.
If you commit a crime in meat space, it's getting harder and harder to get away with it. So if you want to do something, and this is something that's just happening as a result of just better technology, information transparency. A lot of it's hard to prevent, even if you really tried. So the world where things go dark to such an as the police hawks sometimes like to say, to such an extent that oh my God, the criminals are committing crimes with impunity and we can't see anything. That just seems unlikely. But on the other hand, the world where there just is no privacy, for example, or the world where there just is no ability to kind of act outside of the confines of mainstream institutions, that's something that's more realistic, and that seems like something that could lead to a lot of scary things, right? And even from a government's point of view, right? I think governments over the last few years, a lot of them, they're very worried about sovereignty. They're worried about if their countries, economies, and social environments are just completely dependent on basically foreign tech companies controlled by foreign governments. Governments are not on team government, right? It's the Indian government is on team India, the Russian government is on team Russia, and so forth, right? So they don't want the U.S. to be able to have this big backdoor into everything. So I do think that a balance is needed, but at the same time, I do think I guess I definitely worry more about the possibility that just without things like crypto kind of acting outside of institutions becomes too impossible. And I don't even necessarily mean outside of governments, even just outside of corporations, becomes too impossible, and there's just terrible things that come as a result. If things going in the other direction, it obviously is a risk, but at the same time, I think in the long term, a crypto can potentially even offer defenses as much as attacks against that sort of thing.
Yeah. Throughout history, many of the most destructive things came from centralized institutions versus sort of from the people operating in the shadows. And, I've been talking to a bunch of psychedelics folks, the people doing researchers like Rick Doblin in Johns Hopkins. There's a lot of exciting research on psychedelics. And one thing you could say about operating at the edge of legality, it could actually accelerate the adoption of particular things like whether it's marijuana or psychedelics, they can help people out. It almost accelerates the policy. It forces the policy to catch up to where the people stand.
Right.
So there's a positive way of doing things that are in the gray area of legality and creating a market that allows people to in a safe way, be able to participate in this gray area of legality.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing to keep in mind, of course, is that the set of like the kinds of things that just like payment processors as companies try to restrict you from is much larger than the set of things that's illegal, right?
Right.
Like part of that is because they want to be super conservative, and like the more layers you have, the more they're like conservative because they're scared of what the layer below them will do to them. Sometimes they have their own, moral opinions of various kinds. Like, they go after lots of people, right? Like they make life really hard for, like sex workers, for example. Psychedelics, as you mentioned. There's a lot of activity, even including stuff that is totally legal. That just, there's this like, shadow like PayPal credit card government or whatever you want to call it, and that makes it just hard to participate in this stuff. So I think like reducing the number of intermediaries is definitely normally a good thing.
All right, let's talk about one of the most exciting technologies, like technically, philosophically, like socially, financially, in every way, which is Ethereum 2.0. There's a million things to talk about, but at the step one is probably a good thing to do, which is, can you briefly summarize your vision, how Ethereum 2.0 will make Ethereum more scalable, secure, and sustainable?
Sure. So I think recently we've actually been kind of de-emphasizing the ETH 2.0 branding, I guess. So the reason behind that was that originally we envisioned something more like a big grand event where, all the good things would happen at the same time, and it would be a new blockchain, and it would be a new protocol, and people would have to take a lot of effort to migrate over. But later we've slowly changed the roadmap over to something that's much more incremental. Right. So, proof of stake happens kind of over time, and then sharding gets added over time, and all these features get added over time. And so the experience for just a regular Ethereum user still feels very seamless, right? It's like maybe a little bit more complex than the hard forks that we've already done, but from a user's point of view, but like not by that much, right? So the big two things that are happening, right? These are what used to be considered the two flagship features of ETH 2.0, and now they're just, the flagship features of the next evolution of Ethereum.
Yes.
Yeah, as proof of stake and sharding. Right. So proof of stake is a consensus algorithm. It's or consensus mechanism, I should say. It's the difference is that like an algorithm is something that you run by yourself. A mechanism is like it involves like interactions between people, and it could even include incentives and all of that. So a consensus mechanism, so by which nodes in the network agree on, which blocks came in, which transactions came in what order, make sure that once a block gets accepted, it can't get reverted, and all of these things that we expect from a blockchain. So existing blockchains, including Bitcoin, including the Ethereum of today, and including a lot of them, they use proof of work, right? So the reason why we need proof of anything is because like they serve this function that I call kind of economic Sybil resistance. So that's obviously a big word for, especially if you've never heard of Sybils before. But like the basic idea is right that you have a network and you have lots of computers that agree on like which block to accept, and sometimes you get two blocks that get published at the same time, and you just have to agree in an order. So there has to be some kind of voting game. Yeah, but then the question is, well, in this voting game, who gets to vote, who gets to participate? Now, you can't say one person, one vote, right? The reason why you cannot say one person, one vote is because you need some kind of like authority or some kind of mechanism to say, who the humans are, like, and if you don't have that, then a bad guy could just come in with a virtual machine or with a computer that has on it 10 billion virtual machines that have 10 billion, virtual nodes, and then just like say, look, I'm 99% of the